Hello, in this video we're taking a look at exposure therapy, and I'm going to give you a case study of someone I worked with to show you an excellent example of why it's the worst thing you can ever do to overcome a problem. If you're being told to fight the fear, conquer the fear, face up to it, well, I'm going to explain why all of that is nonsense and you're actually going in the completely wrong direction. My name's Paul and I work online with people all over the world to overcome their fear of driving, and it doesn't matter if driving is your problem or not. It might be a fear of flying, a fear of public speaking, agoraphobia, any kind of social situation. It doesn't matter what the situation is, because this is one of the key things you must understand, and you'll see just from this point alone why exposure therapy fails. You see, as I've said many times in my hundreds of videos on anxiety, the problem isn't the problem, okay? Driving anxiety has nothing to do with driving. So if you go out forcing yourself to drive and just driving and driving and driving, all you're doing is just bouncing off the symptoms. You see, the situation that you experience the problem in is only the trigger. So the driving has nothing to do with it. It's just triggering off something else. The flying has nothing to do with it. That's just a trigger. So there is no point in focusing on the trigger, on the symptom. You need to focus on the root cause. So straight away, that's where exposure therapy fails, because you're working at a completely wrong thing. You're working on symptoms instead of the root cause. So anyone who promotes exposure therapy is getting the most basic thing wrong. When you experience your panic attacks, whether it's fear, phobia, whatever you want to call it, when your hands are sweating and shaking, when your throat's dry, when your heart's pounding, whatever you want to call it, whatever label you decide to give it this week, you need to understand that feeling is a message from your mind, okay? It's not actually a problem. It isn't some evil thing that's plaguing your life and it's ruining your life and it's getting worse and worse and worse. The reason it seems to get worse and worse is because you're not listening to the message. So instead of fighting against the problem, what you need to do is listen to the message. This is where so many people go wrong. You see, instead of fighting it and forcing it out and facing up to it with this ridiculous exposure therapy that fails all the time, you need to listen to what the message is. You need to experience those feelings and listen to what they are telling you. Now, this is not easy, but this is why I say in my videos that therapy is not about relaxing. If ever you see a therapist and they're telling you, relax, relax, that's nonsense, because you're not going to get the message by relaxing. In therapy, you want to experience those feelings, listen to what they are saying, and trace them to their root cause, because that is what stops them. It's like your body saying, hey, listen to this. And you're saying, no, fight it, expose myself to it. Your body's thinking, well, you can expose yourself to it all you want. I'm just going to shout louder and louder and louder. And the problem will not go by exposing yourself to it. So what about the times when people say, well, it worked for me? Because people do say to me, well, I went out driving and I forced my way through it. Let me tell you about the massive side effects of using exposure therapy. And I'm going to take this from a client that I worked with. I've had many clients that are in this same position. They contacted me and said, look, I had this problem one day when I went out driving, and it started off, I was on a fast road and I had this massive panic attack, and I didn't know what it was. I'd never had one before. I had no idea what was going on, and I had to pull over and phone a friend to come and pick me up. And from then on, every time I drove, it just seemed to get worse and worse. So I watched some videos online and they all told me to do exposure therapy. So I just kept fighting it. And these driving instructors are saying, just keep going out and push through and just keep telling yourself, I'm safe, I can do it. And then one day it went. It was amazing. The problem just stopped and it went. And I thought, hey, this exposure therapy worked. But then what happened is I started going on trains. And when I went on the train, I had this really weird feeling. My fist started shaking one day and I thought, what's going on? Like my hand was just shaking like mad, and it was a lot like when I was driving and I had the panic attacks driving. I was just shaking, and suddenly this thought came into my mind, and I just couldn't resist the urge to punch the person sitting next to me. And I had to hold my fist down with my other hand, and I just could not get rid of this overwhelming sensation to punch these passengers in the train. And it was so weird, and I had to get off the train, and I just didn't know what to do. Now, that happened because they used exposure therapy. You see, they didn't fix the problem. They forced it out of the driving, but they didn't fix anything. So when they got on a train, the same feelings I had driving came out now instead on a train. And that's how it works. You see, exposure therapy does not fix problems. It's like CBT. That doesn't fix problems either. It just moves them elsewhere or teaches you how to cope with them. You're not actually fixing the problem. And it's funny how many people say to me, exposure therapy does work. I had a fear of driving, and you're wrong, because I just forced my way through. And I watched these videos from a driving instructor, and he told me to just conquer it, and I did it, and I forced my way through. And I'll say to them, what else happened in your life around the time that you've got over this fear of driving? And they say, well, it is funny, you know what? I started having these awful problems sleeping at night, and I just couldn't sleep. What do you think that is? That's your driving anxiety, which has now moved to give you insomnia. If you don't fix a problem properly, it will move elsewhere. I can promise you. It won't just go. You will not beat a problem by facing it head on. You do not get someone to go out in a car and drive when they're having a panic attack. You don't tell them, because I've had people to come to me and say, my doctor told me to go out in the car and just fight the feeling, fight it, beat it. It doesn't matter if you're swerving all over the road, if you feel like you're going to pass out, if you're having a heart attack, just keep going, expose yourself to it, and your body will be fine, and you'll learn that I'm fine and it's okay. Absolute twaddle from people who haven't got a clue what they are doing. You are exposing yourself to symptoms. You're not fixing anything. You're just putting yourself in a situation where the symptoms are going to fire up. It's ridiculous how many people say this. It's like saying to someone who has a fear of public speaking, why don't you book out a hall and book 100 people to come and stand in front of you and give them a speech on why you've got a fear of public speaking? Exposure therapy will fix nothing. All it does is shift the problem elsewhere. And the worst thing is, you may not even know what the problem is. So you could have a fear of driving, and you watch these ridiculous videos online from these idiotic driving instructors who don't know what they're talking about, and they're just telling you to drive and force your way through it, and you'll be fine. And then you go out and your driving's fine. But you may now have a fear of elevators, and you may not even go in an elevator for years, but one day, when you do, you'll have a massive meltdown, just like you had when driving. And if you expose yourself to that, you'll then have other problems elsewhere, because the problem will move. Exposure therapy fails every time. It does not fix a problem. It only moves it elsewhere. So anyone saying that exposure therapy works simply doesn't understand what they're talking about. And if you've used exposure therapy to overcome a fear or phobia, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you haven't. It's just moved somewhere else. And the really sad thing is, you've probably got no idea when and where that feeling is going to pop up again. Watch these other videos on the screen now to learn more about how to really overcome your fear, phobia and anxiety. And if you'd like to work with me one-to-one online from anywhere in the world, contact me through my website, firstdrive.com. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you again soon for more videos.